Let's dive into the epic battle between the native 3D tools in After Effects and 4 powerful plugins: HeliumX, Element, Geo, and Cineware. Adobe has made substantial investments in expanding 3D capabilities directly within After Effects. These native features promise to revolutionize motion graphics and visual effects. With the recent beta or release, depending on when you are going to see this video, we got embedded 3D model animations, shadow catchers, and shadow colors, plus advanced 3D depth map. At the same time, Maxon introduced a new member to the Red Giant Trapcode family named Geo, a powerful tool for lighting, texturing, and cloning 3D objects in After Effects. Some of you on the After Effects Discord server asked me how the new options are comparing to the existing 3D plugins such as Element, HeliumX, and Cineware. So I decided to lift the glove and created a Showdown subjective comparison to put these 4 plugins head to head with the built-in tools in After Effects. And the winner is... well, you need to stick around until the end, or if you are in a rush, skip to the end. But I urge you to stay with me and witness the journey, because I think there is much to be learned. And also, I invested a lot of time in this tutorial, and the results are quite surprising, I might add. As you are aware, After Effects isn't designed as a 3D software, so it doesn't rival dedicated applications like Blender or Cinema 4D. However, this won't influence the comments below, and I do anticipate some humorous remarks from Blender artists. Feel free to keep the comment section lively, because this is its purpose. So keeping it in mind, I wanted to make something short and simple, so I've created a simple animation to promote a record fair in Victoria, London. This event is real and I will be attending, so if you are there, look for me and say hi. Now, I should clarify that I have no affiliations here. Not with the record fair organizers, who are unaware that I'm making a banner for their social media use, so it won't appear anywhere but here. And no with the plugin companies. I'll provide my unbiased and objective review of these tools. Regrettably, I can't cover every detail of these tools because they are very deep, so I've focused on a specific case study, as I told you, creating a 6-second vertical Instagram post. And this project includes one animated 3D model, a 3D title, and a secondary 3D model, which I'm going to animate inside After Effects. So I'll try to evaluate ease of use, how quickly and easily I can set up and animate these elements, the rendering time, and of course the final look. I'll also outline the pros and cons of each tool as I go, including of course the cost. Now that we've established the rules, we can fire up After Effects and start to build the comp. Due to time restraints, and because I already showed you in the past how to do it, I'm not going to create a step-by-step lesson here. Instead, I've recorded my process and I'll speed up through it while describing what I did and share important pointers, praise the positive and criticize the area that needs to be improved. I'm not trying to bash any one of these tools, and I'll tell you right now that each one has strength that the other doesn't offer. Okay, after this long disclosure, I think I'm ready to begin. So I'm going to use After Effects public beta, which you can get from the Creative Cloud desktop app. And I've created the comp and used the shape layer with the gradient fill as my background layer. I converted it to a 3D layer and then imported the record player model that I got from sketchfab.com. There's a link below to everything that I'm going to use, so if you want, you can download it and you can follow along. Now, I actually animated this model in Cinema 4D and then exported it as a GLB object or a 3D model with the animation embedded inside. I'll show you the Cinema 4D process later, but for now, I'll just enable the animation track under the animation options and then place the model in the composition. Next, I'll create the title. I'll place it behind the turntable and extrude it. I've also added a 35mm camera and then framed the layers to look good and then dressed them up, especially the title, with a fancy bevel to make it more legible, as well as catch some lights and shadows. Next, I brought the Audio-Technica headphones, again, link in the description if you want to test this model, and I've placed it above the R letter and fiddled with it for a bit until I was happy from the placement. Oh my God, the problems of an average motion designer. All right, moving forward, I've animated the camera to start from the top view so we can see how the lid is opening and then finish on a frame that reveals all the other ingredients. I then added a line of text with the details of the event and animated it using the blinking cursor typewriter console animation preset that ships with After Effects. The next step is to make things look good. So I've added an environment light, tweaked the settings until I felt it looks good enough for government, and then modified the shadows in the advanced 3D render options. Now this is my main critique for this renderer. It's kind of slow and also doesn't produce clean results. No matter what I did, I couldn't come up with a satisfactory look. I'll return to it and summarize it on my closing speech, but for now, let's move on and add a floor to catch the shadows. I'll place it under the record player and then play with the shadow color and other settings which are all new to this beta version. Now the best news here is that we can use accept shadows only mode and render just the shadows without the floor. So I gave some love to those shadows and then review again the animation using the real-time draft 3D mode, which I really like. And finally, I've used the curves extension from Plug and Play, link in the description. This is a great tool that, among other stuff, will help you to create bounce animation, and I've used it for the headphones. After that, I've messed with the shadow quality even more, trying to get it to look as best as possible. And this allows me to also apply the 3D channel extract effect to the entire comp, which is again something new that you can utilize as a depth map. So you can now use other effects in this category to create 3D fog, for example, but in this case, it wasn't necessary. So I've duplicated the layer, replaced the 3D channel effect with the camera lens blur, used the layer below as a depth map, and animated the focal distance and blur radius to create a depth of field effect. I then rendered the result, which looked like this. Now I'll share the time it took me to complete each step at the end, of course, with my conclusions. But now it's time to do the same thing all over again, but this time using HeliumX. So HeliumX, not related to Elon Musk, is a 3D motion design plugin that I really love. It comes in two variations or editions. One of them is a free tier HeliumX Lite that offers 3D model support, extrude for 3D text and path, primitive procedural 3D shapes, and 3D page scroll. The big brother, HeliumX, add more stuff like VDB support, volumetric lights, terrain, splines, cloners, wireframe renders, assets library, fog, and more useful tools that I can't cover. But if you want, you can go ahead and watch one of these tutorials where I'm actually digging deeper into this plugin. Anyway, I'm going to use the commercial version here, but almost everything in this project can be achieved using the free version as well. Now, to use animated models inside Helium, we need to export it as an OBJ sequence from whatever 3D package you're using. And this is something you can easily do from Cinema 4D. Then I can create a comp using the same length and dimensions as before and add a new solid to it and apply the model effect from the Helium category. I'll import the animated OBJ sequence and set it to the same frame rate of my composition. And then I'll create a null for it, which will allow me to move it freely in the comp. To match it to the previous design I've created using the native After Effects tools, you can copy and paste the elements which are just going to repeat themselves, such as the text layers, the camera, and of course the background. And I'm also going to export a reference frame, which is going to help me to place the objects in the same location. Now, since I'm using the same After Effects 3D space, it should be very easy to match. Now, Helium has its own 3D unified space. So in order for 3D layers to interact with each other, everything needs to be applied to the same layer. Having said that, I must mention that the commercial version also offers the Helium comp effect that will allow you to comp together multiple instances of Helium in the same 3D space of After Effects, which is just great. Now for this project, I'm not going to use it, but this is a big plus. Okay, so I've recreated the title, referencing, of course, the same text, and then imported the headphones model and created a plane for the background with the primitive effect. I placed both objects in the scene using their null object controllers and bounced the headphones using the curves extension again. To cast shadows, you can use the After Effects built-in lights. So I added a spotlight and played with its location and then used a few point lights to fill the dark areas. You can use as many lights as you need and fine-tune the look to your liking, the same way you work with After Effects for years now. The integration with the app is really amazing and everything feels buttery smooth and works really well. It also supports depth of field, motion blur, 3D fog, volumetric lights, cloners, and much more. And although Helium officially doesn't support multi-frame rendering, it works really well. But is it the fastest of them all? Well, I'm not telling yet, and this is because I'm building suspense here. So bear with me while you enjoy the outcome of this plugin. The next tool doesn't need any introduction. This is Element from Video Copilot. I just love Element and, like most of you, admire Andrew Kramer. Although version 2 of Element is showing its age, it's still one of the most capable 3D bridge for After Effects. It supports OBJ and animated 3D scenes directly from Cinema 4D as long as you didn't use point level animation or simulations, which really works perfectly for this instance. So I can just import the Cinema 4D document, and then using the same method I showed you previously, I could easily match the animation with the After Effects camera and text layers. So as before, I'll need to rebuild the scene. Now, using the 3D text in Element is just a joy, thanks to the vast amount of presets and tons of material controls. Now, Element works with groups, so each object can be in its own dedicated group, and all of them will merge together to a 3D unified space that works on a single solid layer. You can then animate individual groups or part of them using, for example, null objects, and then add some lights, cast shadows, tweak the render settings, add an environment layer, use matte shadow to render just the shadow catcher layer, and integrate it with other After Effects layers and effects, and it works really well, fast and quickly, which is the same thing. Anyway, Element will respect motion blur if you switch it on, as well as depth of field automatically, assuming you turn it on for your camera. And my main recommendation is to make sure that you raise the render quality and super sampling settings to get the most out of it. As usual, I'll share with you the render time at the end, but I will show you now how it ended up looking. So this is our Element 3D result. The newest member in this group is Geo, which is part of Red Giant Trapcode family, and it can read 7 different 3D formats. But as far as I know, if you want to include animation, you actually need to save your 3D model for Cineware using Cinema 4D. So make sure to prepare it in Cinema 4D, remove all the materials that you are not using, and then go to File and choose Save for Cineware. In After Effects, create a composition which is going to host your file, and then import the Cinema 4D document along with all the relevant textures. Then make sure the Cinema 4D file is in the timeline so you can reference it, and apply the Geo effect to a new solid. Set the base geometry to custom, where you can choose your model, and you may need to tweak the size to match the comp aspect ratio. I think this is a bug and it should be fixed soon. As before, I'll copy the shared element from the previous comp, and then I'll start to set the scene. To marry the materials, you'll need to drag the textures to the timeline, switch them off, and now, because I forgot to do it earlier, I'll match the 3D model position and scale it to match my reference shot. For some reason, I couldn't get a perfect match here, no matter what I did. So at some point I gave up and started to make it pretty. You can do it by reconnecting the materials to the relevant channels. So you'll need a basic understanding of 3D passes, but once this is done, you'll have full control at the comp level on all your materials, which will allow you to mix it however you want, as well as use effects and create some custom bumps, control the roughness, opacity, and more stuff using regular After Effects tools, which is a huge advantage of this plugin. There's also a super cool and easy way to create shadow catcher. And the workflow is that any layer can receive shadows, and then you can turn it off and set the shadow angle, the shadow quality and color. Everything can be controlled within the plugin. But all is not gold. If you want additional 3D objects, each one of them needs to be on a separate layer, meaning you'll need to prepare it again in Cinema 4D or another 3D application, and the result is that we are not going to get a 3D unified world. So depending on the project that you are working, this can be a deal breaker. In our case, I couldn't get the headphones to interact with the 3D text, so they are just popping in front of this layer. Also, there is no support for depth of field or motion blur yet. On the upside, this effect does offer an impressive 3D cloning system, but I didn't need it for this project. So I've added to the render queue, and the result looks like this. The last option that I tested was the Cineware effect, which is part of After Effects for many years now. This effect has improved over the few cycles, and you can now access different objects from the same Cinema 4D document and animate them separately inside After Effects. Because it relies on Cinema 4D, you need to feel comfortable in this app to make it work. Now there is a light version of Cinema 4D that ships with After Effects, and for some cases it should suffice. But even if you don't feel comfortable inside Cinema 4D, you can still make good use of those C4D files and achieve impressive results within After Effects. As usual, I'll borrow some elements from the previous comp, so the 3D background, the title, and other 3D layers can join this party. And in this case, I've used the Cinema 4D renderer, but you can also work with the classic 3D or the new advanced 3D if you like. Then I can add the recordplayer.c4d file, and in this case, you don't need to save it for Cineware, so just any C4D file will work. Once it's in the timeline, the Cineware effect is going to be applied automatically. So in the Cineware effect, you can switch the renderer to a faster mode and then use the After Effects camera so it will match whatever camera you already have. And then to control the object, you can create a null object controller for the elements using the object list. So I'll use my reference frame again and try to match the appearance by changing the position, scale, and rotation of the null object, which now controls the record player inside the Cinema 4D file. This is just great. Once happy, I can dress it up using lights, but these lights are not going to affect the Cinema 4D elements. They are just going to affect the 3D layers inside After Effects. So the Cinema 4D layer is still a 2D layer that communicate with the Cinema 4D engine using the Cineware effect. This means it also doesn't support 3D unified space. Each model you bring is a separate C4D file with its own controls. Unless you are willing to merge everything inside Cinema, this is going to work for you, but I guess doing so will make the entire process redundant because we actually want to create the integration over here inside After Effects and not rely on a 3D app. However, I do need to make sure you understand how cool it is to work live between those two applications. For example, if you want to change the materials, lighting, or anything concerning 3D models, you can just simply edit them inside Cinema, then save the file, and this is going to update automatically inside After Effects. You don't need to render anything in Cinema, which is very similar to dynamic link between the Adobe apps. Okay, so this is how it looks after a short trip to the render queue. Now let's examine the results side by side for a quick comparison. We can also delve into the statistics and some finer details I jotted down. So to help with this, I've prepared a table outlining different settings and the time required for each step. You can download this PDF if you want to have a look at it and review it at your leisure. However, I want to quickly present my conclusions and personal opinions. This project and process is very subjective and your result may and will vary, but overall the time invested in this is roughly the same across all tools. So After Effects native tools are likely the fastest since I use them to design the animation before attempting to replicate it with other effects, though this is of course open to discussion. A major drawback with the advanced 3D renderer, as I told you before, is the poor shadow quality, sometimes unacceptable. And it's also slow to render. I hope Adobe will move away from the voxel rendering system to alternatives like shadow mapping or maybe ray tracing, which could improve the reflections, fog, and motion blur. But despite these issues, their new features like Unified 3D World and Draft 3D mode are really promising, and I'm enjoying working with native 3D models inside After Effects without any third-party tool. Element remains a robust plugin. Those familiar with it knows its pioneering rule a decade ago and its continued relevance even these days. We can only anticipate a modern update soon. Andrew, are you listening? Geo represents a positive step, rendering beautiful 3D images and offering editable materials. However, its main limitation is the lack of unified 3D space. Cineware impresses with every release, becoming easier to manage and set up. Yet, like Geo, it falls short in unified 3D space, motion blur, depth of field, and certain compositing limitations, though it is rendering very fast. And as you might have guessed, my preferred tool, for this project at least, is HeliumX. It's the fastest, it integrates seamlessly with After Effects timeline, avoids additional interfaces, supports all features of After Effects and Element, and it adds some more stuff. For example, it can handle VDB files, and one of the most important things, it is highly stable. It has a bit of a learning curve, but once mastered, it's straightforward. And also, it offers a 3 option for basic 3D tasks. It also renders in nearly real time, so zero amount of wait. So I hope this detailed overview helps you to decide where you want to invest your 3D efforts in After Effects. Let me know your thoughts and preferences in the comments below. Thank you as always for watching, and I will see you again in the next one.